Welcome to FSU Panama City's Project Runway Sewing Club. Today we'll be working together to create a safe COVID-19 face mask. We would like to thank FSU Panama City, Baby Lock Sewing, Jim's Vacuum and Sewing, and Rose Smith for sponsoring this event. Today I'll be using 100% cotton knit fabric from a recycled t-shirt, 100% cotton thread, hair elastics, and my Baby Lock Zeal sewing machine. Let's get started. Today we'll be using the mask pattern available on the Daddy Deal blog. The address is on your screen. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is to draw and trace your pattern. I find it easier to just trace around it than to cut it because I like to maintain the integrity of my pattern. So I've cut 4 pattern pieces, you can see right here, okay? 4 pattern pieces, and I've used knit. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put together 2 of my pattern pieces right sides together. Since I'm using knit, you can't really tell that it's right sides together, and you can see that the first time I put it together, it's not exactly even, so I have to turn it over again and match the actual sides. So it's important that you get them exactly matching, okay, because you don't want there to be any holes as you sew. So I'm matching the sides exactly, and the sides that I'm matching, as you can see, are the curved sides. So I'm going to sew the curved edge of my mask first. But before I do that, I need to change some settings on my sewing machine. And so what I'm going to do is use what Nancy Zeman calls the wobble stitch. On this machine, on the Baby Lock Zeal, I'm going to use the zigzag stitch with the C, and then I'm going to put it at 2.5 millimeters for the length, and then 0.5 millimeters for the width. That's width at 0.5 and length at 2.5 or 2. So what that does is it creates kind of a stretch stitch on your sewing machine that ultimately looks like a straight stitch. Now what I'm going to do as I sew around that curve is I'm going to make sure that I stay right on my 1/4 inch mark. And on the Zeal, you can see that you've got a 1/8 inch mark, a 3/8 inch mark, and then right in between that is the 1/4 inch mark. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to try as I sew to make certain that I keep the sides even. On the Zeal, you want to make sure that you pull out a very long thread tail so that your machine does not come unthreaded. Note again that I'm sewing on the curved side of the mask. So what I'm making right now is the center of the mask where your nose would go. So this is going to fit right over your face. Sometimes the knit gets stuck underneath the presser foot, so you might have to stop, raise your presser foot, and sort of move it out of the way. Now I'm using sort of a factory method here, and instead of pulling off my fabric and starting a brand new sewing, what I do is I simply connect the 2 pieces together. That way I don't have to stop, cut, and start over again. So I'm just going to do sort of factory style, and you can see I do the same thing. I get it as close to that first as I can. I'm sewing on the curved edge, get it right up underneath my presser foot, and again I'm going to sew on that 1/4 inch mark, okay? You don't want to pull or push your fabric in, you just want to lightly touch it and sort of guide it. And the knit's very forgiving. You can see that I wasn't entirely even there, so I sort of pulled it together, stretched it just a little bit to get to the very end, okay? I'm going to stop at the end of my fabric before I go off the fabric. I'm going to raise my presser foot. I'm going to give it a nice long tail, and then I'm going to clip at the edge of my fabric. So now all I need to do is I need to clip between the 2 pieces that I've just sewn together. All right, so there we go. It's a little chain. So I clip that chain. Now I'm going to open up my 2 pieces, and your 2 pieces should look like this, okay? You should have sewn around the curved edge of the fabric. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up one of my pieces, okay? And you can see there's the front, there's the back. So this is actually the wrong side of my fabric that I'm opening it up to. All right, wrong side of both fabrics. So your seams are exposed. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hem the ends of that fabric. So this is where your earpiece is going to go. This is where you're going to end up connecting your elastics. So I'm just going to turn it over about 1/4 inch, very tiny small hem, and then I'm going to again use my 1/4 inch mark and sew a hem. Probably I've turned it up a little bit more like 3/8, but you can see you just want a very narrow hem, and I'm going to use the same factory style that I used on putting the center of the mask pieces together. I'm going to stop sewing at the end of my fabric, and then I'm going to just slide my second piece right up underneath. You can see. Raise my presser foot, lower it gently, sew it right, and make sure that that fabric gets underneath the presser foot as it goes forward. So you got to go slow on that. It's okay to use your hand wheel instead of your foot pedal to make that go forward to start out with. So now I'm finished hemming 2 sides. All right, so I'm going to raise my presser foot, pull my needles to the highest position, give myself a nice long tail. There we go. All right, and now I'm going to clip in between those 2 pieces. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the other end of the fabric, okay? So you can see that I've sewn a hem on one end of the fabric, and now I'm going to turn it around and sew a hem on the other end of the fabric. And again, make sure that you're on the rough side or the wrong side of the fabric where you've got your seams exposed. Your hem is going to go on the same side as your exposed hem. So this is all on the wrong side of your fabric. So again, I'm folding under a little bit, about 3/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to sew about 1/4 of an inch. Again, I'm going to use the little factory method there. Get close to the end. I'm going to stop at the very, very end. Give it a little clip. Okay. Now, what happened on that one is I didn't actually catch my hem, so I'm having to re-hem it before I move on to my next piece, okay? I didn't make my hem deep enough. So you might want to do a little measuring. I'm doing this without measuring. I'm just sort of eyeballing it, and you might want to be a little bit more precise than I was. You might want to actually measure it so that you don't run off like I just did. All right, so here's my second piece. And so this will be the 4th hem that I've put in. So I've put a hem on each end of the earpiece side of the fabric, of the surgical mask front and surgical mask back. Make sure that you give yourself a nice long tail. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip those pieces apart again, and then I'm going to fold one mask piece right sides together and one wrong sides together. But before I do that, I'm going to trim off all of my long threads because I've got a lot of threads hanging out. Make sure when you trim your threads that you throw them in the garbage can. Long threads can get wrapped around the intestines of your dog or your cat, and that's not a pretty surgery. So just make sure that, I don't know why they like to eat the thread tails, but they do. So make sure you put all those in your garbage can or in a plastic bag, wherever you dispose of them. You just don't want them to fall on the floor. I have a black Labrador, so I'm spending some time pulling black hair off of the fabric mask. These can be washed. These are made out of 100% cotton knit, so they can be washed, and they can also be Cloroxed in the wash. So now you can see that I've got one piece of my mask with the raw edge showing, and then I'm going to fold this one so that the raw edges are not showing. And what I'm doing right here is so that I can put my mask pieces together and get the nose center at the same place, because it's a little bit difficult to match that unless you lay them out the way I'm laying them out right here. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm matching those two pieces, getting them absolutely and making sure they're the same, making sure that the nose piece is the same on both sides, that little where the curve is, because that curve isn't right in the center, it's a little bit to the left, you can see that. Now I'm going to put my hand inside, and then I'm going to slip that inside of the right side of the other mask piece. So now I've got right sides together, and I've got raw sides exposed, and I know that I've got my mask exactly where it should be. Because what I need to do next is sew across the top of the mask, and then I'll sew all the way across the bottom of the mask. Be really careful to match your edges. Okay, and I'm going to use the same 1/4 inch stitch guide. Lower your presser foot. Now on this I'm going to sew forward and backward so that I can make sure that the edge stays together. You want to make sure you always sink your needle into fabric. It's just, machine likes that a whole lot more. So I'm going to go backward now a little bit, and now I'm just going to sew forward, try to keep my edges together. Sometimes that knit, that very thin knit, and of course you want to use the thickest knit that you can, but sometimes they curl up a little bit. Now I'm coming to the seam, so I want to make sure that I've got one of my seams folded to the left and one folded to the right, and that is simply to reduce the bulk. So you can see that one is to the right, that one's to the left, and so now I'm going to be able to sew over it without a big bulky fabric. You can also open up your seams if you prefer it that way. This is just a little bit easier on the knit to allow one seam to go one way and the other seam to go the other way. Now I'm holding my fabric edges, I'm holding the edges even, sewing pretty slowly. When I get to the end, I'm going to sew forward and backward. Okay, and now I'm going to remove my fabric from beneath my presser foot, pull out a nice long tail, and you can see I've sewn across the very top of that piece of that fabric. Okay, so now the top of my fabric mask is done. Now I'm going to sew on the other side. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to match those edges. All right, and again we're on the seams are all exposed right now. I'm sewing from the underside of the fabric, or the wrong side of the fabric. Again, I'm going to lower my presser foot. I'm going to sew forward, and then I'm going to sew backward to stabilize those seams. And then I'm going to do the same thing with these two seams here. I'm going to make one seam go to the left, one seam go to the right, and I'm going to match that center perfectly. I'm going to sew very slowly, even though it doesn't look slow. I am sewing pretty slowly. I'm going to go slowly over that, the bulk. Now I've got some ends that don't match, but the knit is very forgiving, so I'm able to stretch it and allow those ends to match perfectly. So backwards over the edge of that, raise my presser foot, my needle to the highest position, my presser foot, pull my thread out, and then I am able to clip my threads. And now I'm finished with the construction of the mask. So I'm going to pull off all the little spare threads, clip them. And I'm making sure that my stitches meet and that I don't have any holes in the mask, because we don't want any stitch holes anywhere. We want to make sure that all of our stitches match and meet, and there's no room for air, AIR, to go in. We don't want any viral particles to go inside of that mask, so we're being really careful about keeping those stitches. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like right now. Now we're going to turn it right side out. And once you've turned it right side out, you're ready to put your elastics on. Now the elastic, you're going to have to figure out sort of what length you want. We're using a 5-inch length, but you could make it, for a child, you can make it 4 inches. For a very large adult you might want to make it even 5.5 or 6 inches, but that's what it looks like turned right side out. Okay, so I use hair elastics. They work out really well. And so here you can see I've got 2 hair elastics, but you can see these are flat. They're not the rounded ones because the flat ones are just easier to sew. So I give it a clip, and then I open it up, and I love the Baby Lock Zeal because it's got this ruler on the bottom, and I'm going to use the 5-inch mark and make my elastic 5 inches. But you can see you can make it 4.5 or 4 if you have a very small child, or maybe 5.5 or 6 if you have a very large adult. So you'll need to play with that for your family. So I've got the end. I'm going to slip the elastic into the end of my mask, and then I'm going to feel it to make sure that I've actually stuck it in there. You don't want to stick it in too far. You're going to stick it in about 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch, and then you're going to lower your presser foot, and then you're going to sink your needle into that elastic to make sure that you are sewing that elastic. That elastic likes to wiggle out of place, so you want to use your hand wheel to lower that needle into the elastic to make sure it stays where it needs to stay. So, and then you're going to sew forward. You might need to hold on to the elastic because it loves to wiggle. You're going to sew it forward. You're going to sew backwards. You're going to sew over it several times because you want to make sure that this elastic does not come out, okay? That would certainly compromise the integrity of the whole project. So sew over it several times. I'm using 100% quilter's cotton thread, and it washes really well. And again, you know, you can use Clorox on it. It does not, cotton doesn't absorb and hold on to the viral particles. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the mask, and you can see that you're going to slide your elastic in. I chose this pattern. I tried about 5 different patterns, but I like this one best. According to a Cambridge University study on homemade masks, 100% cotton knit works really well. And the reason is that you can breathe through it, and you're more likely to wear this mask than you are, say, for example, quilter's cotton really does have a higher density, and it's able to filter more of the viral particles. However, quilter's cotton is very difficult to breathe in. And so what happens is people tend to pull the mask away from their face if it's made out of the quilter's cotton so they can breathe. So what the Cambridge University study found was that 100% cotton knit works very well. And the way this particular mask is made, there's an opening on either side. You can see that I've stitched back and forth on that so that it's holds the elastic in. I'm going to show you later on how you can slide a paper towel into the mask, and that gives it even 20% more coverage. So you end up with about 70 to 80% ability for the filter, about a 70% filter for the viral particles. So there's one end. That's what one end looks like. And then we're going to do the other end. So we'll need to put the elastic into the other end. And remember, you're sewing this on the right side. So you've got your right side. There are no exposed seams here. You've turned this right side out. Your exposed seams are on the inside. And so you're going to slide your elastic piece into, And you want to make sure that you slide it deeply enough into the little pocket there that it stays. Because if it's not deep enough in there, what's going to happen is it's going to slip right out. And you can see right here what happens. Mine slips right out. I'm not all the way in there, and it can be kind of frustrating. It's so funny because as you're sewing this, some of these are going to go more easily than others. Some of them are just not going to, they're not going to cooperate. So it might take a second or two to get the hang of this. Yeah, see that one I just completely missed that. And since I completely missed that, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to pick those threads out so that I can open it up all the way. It has to be opened all the way. You want that elastic to go all the way to the edge of that pocket. Otherwise, you're going to have a gap where you don't want a gap, and it's going to give a face gap. So I had to pick all of those little pieces out. Now I'm going to slide it all the way in, making sure that I actually have that elastic in deeply enough in that it doesn't come out. I'm going to lower my presser foot. I'm going to lower that needle in there and make sure that I actually have the elastic and not just the thickness of the fabric. Okay, so here we go. We're going to sew that again. So backwards and forwards. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing to the other side. And I don't know why this end gave me such trouble, but it did. And like I said, this is just, every once in a while this happens. That elastic just does not want to cooperate and stay in there. You can do this with the round hair ties also, but it's even more difficult to get that elastic to stay in. So the flat ones work better. There are also some flat hair bands that work really nicely, flat elastic hair bands. Right now, everyone is sold out of them because I think everybody's trying to do the same thing. So I'm going to slide it in that end. Now, it's a little bit easier to sew from this way. All right, so you can sew starting so that you're sewing towards the outside, and that works a little bit better. So I'm going to sew forward and backwards. So those are two techniques. Sewing from the outside in is more difficult than sewing from the inside out. And you can see I'm kind of sewing from the open side of the fabric to the open side of the pocket to the closed side. So that one worked a whole lot better. That one went in a lot easier. Give myself a long thread tail. Now I'm going to clip all my threads, and I've got lots and lots. So the next thing you're going to do then, you're finished now with all the sewing. So now all you need to do is to cut a paper towel, the proper mix. That's where your nose is going to go. And you're going to just clip a paper towel, and you're going to try to cut it to the size of your mask. And maybe the easiest thing to do in order to do that is to trace around your mask. I would advise you to just do this once and make a nice pattern. You know, like this is very, very, very crude, but you get the idea. You want to make it about a ½ inch smaller than your actual mask. So draw around that paper towel and give yourself a pattern. And I would just advise you to cut several of these at a time, because every time you use the mask, you're going to want to do two things when you come home. You're going to want to pull out that paper towel and throw it away, and you're going to want to take that mask and put it in your wash machine and wash it really well. If you don't have a wash machine available, it's soap that breaks down the casing of the virus. And so you want to make sure that you're washing this in soap, soap and water. Dishwashing soap works really well to kill the virus as it breaks down the, there you go. So you're going to put it in, slide it through, you're going to straighten it up. This is going to be a little bit tricky, and you're going to see it's a little bit tricky to get it in there. But once you do it a few times, it gets a whole lot easier. And when you finish with it, you're going to end up with a mask that you can wear and know that you and your loved ones are safe. We thank you so much for joining us today. Stay safe.